This is absolutely pathetic work. That's what he said to me, right there, in front of everyone. 32 executives sitting around that glossy conference table, watching me like I was some kind of car crash they couldn't look away from. I remember the way he picked up my proposal, this thing I'd spent 6 months of my life on pinched between his thumb and forefinger like it was contaminated. Then Garrett Vaughn, CEO of one of the biggest players in the industry, the man who'd built his reputation on brutal honesty, tore my contract in half. Not metaphorically, literally tore the paper in half. 2.8 million? This is what you think your idea is worth? You're clearly not ready for the big leagues. I'm Thea, by the way. Thea Reeves, 34 years old, and at that moment about ready to either vomit, cry, or possibly commit a felony. I'd always been the responsible one, the woman who worked twice as hard as everyone else, who triple-checked everything, who never raised her voice even when she should have. But something inside me broke that day, not in the way Garrett probably hoped. Not a breakdown, not tears, something else entirely. When he finished his little performance, tossing the torn contract onto the table between us, everyone expected me to crumble. Instead, I looked him directly in the eyes. "You're absolutely right, sir." The room went silent. Garrett blinked twice, clearly thrown off by my calm acceptance. "I'm clearly not ready for your league." I stood up, gathered my materials with steady hands. "Thank you for your time." As I walked out, I could hear the murmuring start behind me. Nobody walks out on Garrett Vaughn, especially not after he's eviscerated them. But I wasn't walking out defeated. I was walking out with purpose. Before I go deeper into this story, I'd really appreciate if you could hit the like button if you've ever dealt with someone who tried to humiliate you. Leave a comment too if you've had your own revenge moment. I read all of them, I promise. So here's the thing about Garrett Vaughn. On paper, he was untouchable. 46 years old, net worth somewhere north of 300 million, featured in all the business magazines, donated to all the right charities, had a beautiful wife named Elise who ran some prestigious foundation, 2 perfect children at elite private schools, a reputation for being tough but fair. But nobody gets that powerful by being fair. I'd been working as director of new acquisitions at a competing firm. Smaller, hungrier. We'd identified a revolutionary technology developed by this brilliant engineer named Mira Costa. Her work could literally change how an entire segment of our industry operated, and Garrett wanted it. What he didn't know was that I'd spent the last year getting to know Mira, not as a potential acquisition, but as a human being. Her sister had a rare form of muscular dystrophy. Mira had developed her technology partly to help people like her sister. She wasn't in it just for money. She wanted her work to mean something. The proposal I brought to Garrett wasn't just about numbers. It was a carefully structured deal that would have given Mira creative control, guaranteed research funding for 5 years, and included a partnership with a leading medical research foundation. The $2.8 million was just the upfront payment. The full deal was worth much more, but structured in a way that protected Mira's vision. But Garrett didn't bother to read past the first page. He saw the initial number and made his judgment. Pathetic, he'd called it. I got into my car in the underground parking garage and just sat there for almost an hour. Not crying, not panicking, just thinking. About all the times I'd seen Garrett and men like him destroy people's careers over ego. About all the brilliant women I'd watched leave the industry because they couldn't take one more day of being talked over, passed over, or pushed out. I thought about Lydia, my former colleague who'd attempted suicide after Garrett had publicly ridiculed her marketing strategy, then implemented it himself 6 months later, taking all the credit when it succeeded. I thought about Javier and RD, who'd been forced to sign away his patent rights under duress, then was fired a week later for performance issues. That's when I decided. Garrett Vaughn was going to learn what pathetic truly meant. Now, I need to be clear about something. I didn't want revenge in the Hollywood sense. I didn't want to kill him or ruin his family or anything stupid like that. I wanted justice. I wanted him to feel what it was like to be humiliated, to have everything you've worked for treated like garbage. And most importantly, I wanted to make sure he couldn't do this to anyone else. I went home that night and made a list. Not of crazy revenge scenarios, but of Garrett's vulnerabilities. Every powerful person has them, even if they don't show. First, his reputation. Garrett built his entire identity around being seen as a business genius, a visionary. He needed constant validation about his intelligence. Second, control. He micromanaged everything, couldn't delegate, couldn't stand not being the smartest person in any room. Third, his marriage. There were rumors, always carefully suppressed, about trouble between him and Elise. Nothing specific, but enough to make me think there was something there. Fourth, his company's upcoming IPO. They were 6 months away from going public, and Garrett had been pumping the valuation, making promises to investors that would be nearly impossible to keep. The next morning, I called Mira Costa. I told her exactly what happened in that meeting room. "I'm not surprised," she said. "He tried to approach me directly 3 months ago, offered me a partnership that would have basically given him ownership of everything I've built." That's when she told me something I hadn't known. Garrett had threatened her. Subtly, of course. He was too smart for direct threats. But he'd made it clear that if she didn't sell to him, he would make sure her technology never made it to market. "He has a lot of friends in regulatory circles," Mira said, "and he mentioned how easy it would be for someone to question the safety protocols of my systems." That was the moment I knew I couldn't just walk away. This wasn't just about my humiliation anymore. This was about stopping someone who was actively harming innovation and the people behind it. "Mira," I said, "what if I told you there's a way to get your technology to the people who need it? Make sure you maintain control, and teach Garrett Vaughn a lesson he'll never forget." There was a pause on the line. Then Mira said 5 words that changed everything. "I'm listening. What's your plan?" The plan took shape over the next 2 weeks. I reached out to contacts. I trusted people who'd had their own Garrett Vaughn experiences. Turned out, there were a lot of them. Nadine, a former board member who'd been forced out after questioning Garrett's accounting practices. She still had friends in the company and access to information that wasn't public. Elliot, a journalist who'd tried to write a story about Garrett's business tactics 3 years earlier, only to have it killed after Garrett threatened the publication with a lawsuit. He'd been gathering evidence ever since, waiting for the right moment. Devin, a programmer who'd worked directly under Garrett for 2 years before being fired for lack of innovation, right after Devin had shared a breakthrough idea that Garrett later claimed as his own. And most surprisingly, Elise Vaughn herself. I hadn't planned to involve Garrett's wife, but Nadine suggested it. Apparently, Elise had been looking for a way out of her marriage for years. Garrett had threatened to destroy her if she ever left him, using his influence to make sure her foundation would lose all its funding. "She hates him more than any of us," Nadine told me, "but she's terrified of him too." I arranged to meet Elise under the pretense of discussing a donation to her foundation. We met at a small cafe across town, far from anywhere Garrett or his associates might be. The woman who sat across from me didn't look like the confident, polished philanthropist I'd seen in photos. She looked exhausted, wary. When I carefully brought up my real reason for meeting her, I expected denial, maybe anger. Instead, she laughed, a hollow, terrible sound. "You have no idea what he's really like," she said. "The man you saw humiliate you? That's his good side." Then she rolled up her sleeve. The bruises were fading but still visible. 4 distinct finger marks around her wrist. "He's very careful," she said quietly. "Never leaves marks where anyone can see them. Never loses control in public. It's all calculated." I felt sick. This wasn't what I'd expected. This was worse. Much worse. "I can't be directly involved," Elise said, "but I can give you information. And when the time comes, I'll corroborate whatever needs corroborating." That night, I couldn't sleep. The plan I'd been forming suddenly felt inadequate. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about stopping someone truly dangerous. I called Mira the next morning. "The plan is changing," I told her. "Are you still in?" "After what you just told me about Elise. More than ever." We set things in motion. Mira reached out to Garrett directly, told him she'd reconsidered his offer, said she'd had a falling out with me and was interested in working with him instead. Garrett, predictably, was delighted. He invited her to his office for a private meeting the following week. Meanwhile, I worked with Elliot to prepare everything we'd need. Devin created a secure communication system for all of us, one that couldn't be traced back to any of us. Nadine provided us with internal documents showing how Garrett had been systematically inflating the company's value ahead of the IPO. Not just normal corporate optimism, actual fraud. Numbers changed, projections manipulated, problems hidden. Elise gave us something even more damning. Recordings, dozens of them. Garrett, verbally abusing her. Garrett, on business calls, ordering his team to falsify reports. Garrett, threatening a former employee who'd filed a sexual harassment complaint. He doesn't know I have these, Elise told me. He thinks I'm too stupid, too scared to protect myself. The day of Mira's meeting with Garrett arrived. She was wired, not with an actual wire that would have been too risky, but with Devin's creation, a recording device disguised as a stylish pen. State of the art, completely undetectable. I sat in a cafe across the street, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. If Garrett discovered what we were doing, I didn't even want to think about it. 3 hours later, Mira walked into the cafe. Her face was pale, but there was a fire in her eyes I'd never seen before. I got it, she said, sliding the pen across the table. All of it. That night, the 5 of us, me, Mira, Elliot, Nadine, and Devin gathered in a hotel room to listen to the recording. What we heard made my blood run cold. Garrett had spent the first hour charming Mira, presenting himself as a visionary who understood the importance of her work. Then, once he thought he had her trust, he'd revealed his true intentions. He planned to patent her technology under his company's name. He would give her a position as chief researcher, but with no actual authority. And if she ever tried to fight him on it, he'd make sure she was discredited in the industry. Technology created by women always gets extra scrutiny, he'd said with a laugh. One hint that your safety protocols might be compromised, and no one will touch your work for years. That's just how the game is played, sweetheart. But the worst part came later. When Mira asked about my involvement, why he'd rejected the deal I'd presented. Thea Reeves? She's nobody. Another ambitious woman who doesn't understand how things work. I've dealt with dozens like her. They either learn their place or they disappear. Then he described, in chilling detail, how he'd systematically undermined my reputation within the industry over the past year. How he'd spoken to my bosses, suggesting I was unstable, difficult to work with. How he'd blocked potential job opportunities without my knowledge. I sat there, stunned. I'd attributed my recent professional struggles to bad luck, to the economy, to normal industry challenges. Never had I imagined someone was actively working to destroy me. Why? Mira had asked him. Why go to all that trouble over someone you consider nobody? Garrett's answer chilled me to the bone. Because she reminds me of my wife. That same look in her eyes, like she thinks she's better than me. Women like that need to be taught their place. The room fell silent after the recording ended. I couldn't speak, couldn't process what I'd just heard. It was Elise who broke the silence. She'd arrived halfway through the playback, slipping into the room quietly. Now you understand, she said. This isn't about business for him. It never was. It's about power, control. In that moment, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about getting justice for myself anymore, or even for Mira, or Elise, or any single person. This was about stopping someone who'd hurt countless people and would continue hurting more if nobody stopped him. I looked around the room at these people who'd trusted me, who'd risked so much already. They were waiting for me to tell them what came next. Tomorrow, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We end this. We met at dawn. Nobody slept that night. How could we? Elise looked particularly haunted, like someone walking to their own execution. In a way, she'd be sacrificing the life she'd built, her safety net, her public image, everything. Are you sure? I asked her one last time. Once we do this. I've been a prisoner for 12 years, she said. I'm ready to break out. The plan was intricate but clean. We weren't going to use illegal means that would make us no better than Garrett. We would use the truth. All of it. strategically deployed for maximum impact. Step 1. Elliot published his long-researched article about Garrett's business practices, not in some small outlet, but in one of the most respected business publications in the country. The editor-in-chief was a woman who had her own history with Garrett. He'd tried to block her promotion years earlier. She'd been waiting for a bulletproof story. The article wasn't just accusations. It was documented evidence. Financial records Nadine had provided, testimonials from former employees, all verified. And most damning, direct quotes from the recordings Mira had made, alongside historical patterns of behavior documented by others. By 9 a.m., the article was live. By 9:15, Garrett was calling an emergency board meeting. Step 2. While Garrett was locked in that boardroom, desperately trying to control the narrative, Devin activated the secure server we'd created. Onto it went everything. The full recordings, both Mira's and Elise's, the internal documents showing financial fraud, emails Garrett had sent threatening various people over the years, forwarded to us by recipients who'd been too afraid to use them before, but now saw an opportunity for justice. We didn't release this publicly. Instead, Devin sent access to 3 specific groups: the SEC investigators who'd been quietly looking into the company's pre-IPO claims, the board members currently sitting in that emergency meeting with Garrett, and the 5 largest institutional investors backing the IPO. Step 3. Elise held a press conference. Not about Garrett specifically. That would have seemed like a bitter wife's revenge. Instead, she announced a new initiative through her foundation focused on workplace harassment and domestic abuse among high-profile executives. Too often, she said to the cameras, we assume power and character go hand in hand. They don't. Sometimes the most powerful people are the most damaged, the most dangerous. She never mentioned Garrett by name. She didn't have to. The timing said everything. By noon, Garrett's carefully constructed world was collapsing. The board meeting had devolved into chaos after members started receiving and reviewing the evidence on their devices. 2 board members walked out immediately, unwilling to be associated with what they were seeing. Investors were pulling out of the IPO, the stock was plummeting, and reporters were calling everyone connected to the company. And where was I during all this? Sitting in Garrett's office, waiting for him. His assistant had been easy to get past. I'm here to apologize to Mr. Vaughn. I told her about the misunderstanding with the Costa proposal. She'd looked skeptical but buzzed me in. Garrett was still in his emergency meeting, but she said he'd be back any minute. I sat in one of the chairs facing his desk, calm in a way I'd never felt before. Not happy, not triumphant, just centered, like I was exactly where I needed to be. The door flew open 40 minutes later. Garrett stormed in, his face contorted with rage. He didn't even notice me at first, slamming the door behind him and going straight to his desk where he gripped the edge so hard his knuckles went white. When he finally looked up and saw me sitting there, the shock on his face was almost comical. "What the hell are you doing in my office?" he snarled. I smiled. Not a vindictive smile, just a calm one. I wanted to be here for this moment. What moment? The moment I call security to drag you out of here? The moment you realize it's over, Garrett. His face flushed dark red. You think that hit piece is going to hurt me? I've survived worse. By next week, no one will remember it. It's not just the article, I said quietly. It's everything. The SEC has your financial records. The board has the recordings, all of them, including the ones Elise made at home. Your investors have pulled out. The IPO is dead. I watched as understanding dawned on his face, followed by disbelief, then rage, then most satisfyingly fear. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. We already have. I stood up slowly. You're done, Garrett. Your board is meeting right now to discuss your removal. The DA's office is reviewing evidence of financial fraud. And Elise has filed for divorce, along with a restraining order detailing 12 years of abuse. He lunged toward me then, around the desk, his hand raised. I didn't flinch, didn't move. That would be a mistake, I said, nodding toward his raised hand. There are cameras in this room. Your cameras. And right now, I guarantee people are watching the feed very carefully. His hand dropped. For a moment, he seemed to shrink before my eyes, no longer the towering figure who had torn my contract, but just a man, a small, angry man whose power was evaporating by the second. Why? He finally asked. Because I rejected your pathetic proposal? Because I hurt your feelings? This is what women do. They can't handle business, so they make it personal. I almost laughed. Even now, he couldn't see it. This isn't about my feelings, Garrett. It's about justice. For Lydia, who almost died because of you. For Javier, whose innovation you stole. For Elise, who endured your abuse for 12 years. For Mira, whose life's work you tried to steal. And yes, for me too. But mostly, it's for everyone you would have hurt next. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. You called my work pathetic, but here's the thing about my work. It stands on its own merits. Can you say the same? I walked out without waiting for his answer. I didn't need to hear it. The answer was playing out across news sites, across the stock ticker, across the faces of people in the building who were frantically packing up their desks as the company imploded. Outside, the others were waiting for me. Mira, Nadine, Devin, Elliot, and Elise, looking simultaneously terrified and more alive than I'd ever seen her in photos. Is it done? Mira asked. It's done, I confirmed. What happened next unfolded with a speed that surprised even me. By evening, Garrett had been removed as CEO by unanimous board vote. By the next morning, the SEC had formally announced an investigation. By the end of the week, criminal charges related to financial fraud were filed. Elise's divorce filing included damning evidence of physical and emotional abuse, and despite Garrett's attempts to fight it, the judge granted her everything she asked for, including full control of the charitable foundation they'd started together. Mira's technology found a home with a smaller, more ethical company, one that gave her full creative control and a genuine partnership. The deal I structured for her ended up being worth far more than the $2.8 million Garrett had mocked. As for me, the strangest thing happened. After the story broke, my phone started ringing. Other companies, impressed by what they'd seen as strategic brilliance rather than revenge, wanted me on their teams. Former colleagues reached out to reconnect. For the first time in my career, I had options, real ones. But I didn't take any of those corporate offers. Instead, Mira and I started our own firm, specializing in helping female innovators bring their technology to market without losing control of their vision. We called it Restitution Partners. A little on the nose, maybe, but it felt right. 3 months after that day in Garrett's office, I got a letter. No return address, but the expensive stationery told me who it was from before I even opened it. Inside was a single sentence in Garrett's handwriting: I underestimated you. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just recognition that he'd misjudged me. Coming from him, it was practically a surrender. I didn't respond. Some people don't deserve the courtesy of a reply. Elise came to work with us 6 months later, bringing her foundation's resources to help support women who'd faced similar situations. Together, we created a network of legal, financial, and emotional support for people targeted by abusive power figures in the business world. And Garrett? Last I heard, he was living in a modest condo in Arizona, working as a consultant for small businesses. Nobody at his level would touch him anymore. His reputation, the thing he valued above all else, was destroyed beyond repair. The company he'd built recovered eventually, under new leadership that prioritized ethics and innovation equally. Some of the people he'd hurt found healing in seeing justice done. Others just wanted to move on. Both reactions were valid. I still think about that day in the conference room sometimes. How close I came to breaking down, to giving him the reaction he wanted. How differently things might have turned out if I'd shown him my pain instead of my resolve. But mostly, I think about all the people like Garrett who are still out there, still hurting others, still untouched, and I wonder who will be brave enough to stand up to them. Maybe it's someone watching this right now, someone who's been hurt, humiliated, pushed aside, someone who's thinking, that could never be me. I could never do what Thea did. But you could. With the right support, the right evidence, the right timing, you absolutely could. If this story resonated with you at all, please hit the subscribe button. I don't just share these stories for views. I share them because I want to build a community of people who understand that power without accountability is just another form of violence. Your comments help me know I'm not alone in this fight. And every like helps this message reach someone who might need to hear it. And if you're out there facing your own Garrett Vaughn, remember this. Their power depends on your silence. Their control depends on your fear. The moment you decide enough, really decide it, deep in your soul, that's when everything can change. It won't be easy, it won't be quick, but trust me when I say, justice, real justice, is worth every step of the journey.